Thanks for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, France's African World War-era soldiers win a final battle. Known as the tirailleurs Senegalese, the surviving fighters will be able to end their days back in Africa if they wish, after a pension U-turn by Paris. Also, Tunisia's central bank chief says 2023 will be a complicated year unless the country strikes a deal with the IMF. Authorities are also gearing up to bring in tougher measures to try to roll back the fiscal deficit. And as Benin gears up for this weekend's legislative elections, we hear from some voters about their hopes for peaceful polling after the previous exercise spiraled into deadly violence. But first, after years of campaigning on their behalf, some of the last African soldiers drafted to fight for France during the era of the World Wars will finally be allowed to keep claiming their French pensions if they choose to return to live full-time in Africa. The previous rules had separated many of the veterans from their families, meaning some died alone, away from loved ones.
We want reparations. We want to go home.
To be with our children, our women folk.
But keeping the minimum old age benefits that I have.
France should really realize that we fought all wars on their side. They must help us, because we fought all of those wars with them.
Well, today, 37 of the former tirailleurs still live in France. The youngest is 90 years old. Wednesday's decision concerns 22 men who collect around €950 a month in pension. Sam Bradpiece tells us more about the significance of the French government's U-turn on the tirailleurs' pension rights.
An estimated 200,000 tirailleurs Senegalese fought for the French during the First World War. A further 150,000 of these African soldiers fought alongside the French during the Second World War. Today, though, it's thought that there are fewer than 80 tirailleurs still alive, all over the age of 90 years old. Up until now, these veterans had to spend at least 6 months of the year residing in France in order to collect their pensions from the French government. Now, though, after a years-long campaign, they've won the right to collect their pensions in their countries of origin. The group behind the campaign says it's delighted that these former soldiers can now receive their pensions in their countries of origin alongside their families, something that many of them had been pushing for many years. They note still, though, that there is some inequality in the way in which the former African soldiers are treated compared to the former French soldiers themselves. They note, for example, that the disability pension for a tirailleur Senegalese is still far lower than that of their French counterparts. Hardly a just reward for their sacrifice.
Sam Bradpiece there for us. Now, Senegal's National Office for Veterans and Victims of War has said that the decision was overdue. For most, though, it has come too late. The announcement of the change in the tirailleurs' pension rights coincided with the release here in France of a film that, for the first time, spotlights the sacrifices made by African soldiers fighting for France during World War I. Called Tirailleurs, it tells the story of a young conscripted Senegalese soldier and of his father, who enrolls in the infantry to try and find him. Ugandan police have charged an events promoter in connection to a New Year's Eve stampede in which 10 people were killed. Most of the victims were children. Abi Musinguzi is known for having staged major festivals and has been charged with 9 counts of fatal negligence. Police say 4 exits had been ordered shut when the crush happened at Freedom City Mall. At least 35 people have been killed in a double car bombing in central Somalia. The attack in the town of Mahas is the latest in a string of attacks by al-Shabaab extremists. One bomb reportedly targeted the house of the district commissioner, whilst the other targeted the home of a federal lawmaker. The Somali government had begun the prosecution of the Secretary General of the country's SJS journalist syndicate. Abdallah Ahmed Mumin appeared in court in Mogadishu on Wednesday to face charges of criminal disobedience and bringing the state into contempt. Rights campaigners have called for the charges against him to be dropped, alleging that they are politically motivated. Wednesday saw protests in Dakar against the continued detention of a Senegalese journalist and government critic. Pape Alé Niang heads Dakar Matin online news site and has been on hunger strike for 2 weeks since being sent back to prison on December 20th. The government critic was first arrested on November the 6th last year after writing about rape charges faced by the country's main opposition leader. He was charged with divulging information likely to harm national defence. Doctors have grown increasingly worried about his health. A former Tunisian environment minister has been sentenced to 3 years in prison over his role in the illegal importing of hundreds of containers of waste from Italy. Mustafa Aoui and several other officials were sacked and arrested over the scandal in 2020. The containers had been brought in from southern Italy by a Tunisian company that falsely claimed that they contained plastic for recycling rather than banned household waste. Now, staying with Tunisia, it's been grappling a severe economic crisis. Well, on Wednesday, its central bank chief predicted that 2023 would be a complicated year unless the country strikes a deal with the International Monetary Fund. Authorities there are also gearing up to bring in tough measures that they hope will help reduce the fiscal deficit. Caroline Nambele talks us through.
A pessimistic start to the new year. Tunisia's central bank governor warning against the consequences should the deal with the IMF fall through.
The problem we're facing today is that 2023 is going to be a complicated year if Tunisia doesn't reach an agreement with the fund in terms of mobilizing external financing and even domestic financing.
The IMF's rescue package would provide Tunisia with around $2 billion. It's been pending since October. According to the authorities, the deal was held up partly because of delays over the budget, which has been met with resistance. The country's powerful UGTT trade union has warned it would hold mass protests against plans for new austerity measures. It's described the new budget as an injustice and as increasing the suffering of Tunisians. On Wednesday, the central bank governor announced tougher measures to come.
There will also be a gradual lifting of subsidies on basic products, in particular when it comes to fuel. Over the next 3 to 4 years, we will see prices increase significantly.
Tunisia has been grappling with a severe economic crisis. Inflation reached a record high of 9.8% in November. And in the past months, some shops have resorted to rationing amid shortages of basic goods and fuel.
Well, Benin starts off the new year with legislative elections. They're set for this weekend on January the 8th. The previous exercise spiraled into deadly violence, particularly in the centre and north of the country. Our correspondents have been speaking to voters about their hopes for the smooth running of the polling this weekend.
A few days before the legislative elections in Save, a township in central Benin, the political climate is calm. Memories of the violence that followed the 2019 elections are fading. The election campaign atmosphere this year is friendly.
Everyone is happy. It's a party like it was in the old days. That's what it's like right now.
I am very happy because during the previous local elections, I wanted to vote, but I could not because the party I wanted to vote for was not in the race.
No opposition party was able to participate in the last legislative elections as new electoral laws at the time made it difficult for them to comply. Today, this opposition activist is relieved things have changed.
We've been waiting for this moment. Since the political breakdown, the elections have not been inclusive. We have always been excluded, but we're happy there is a change. It's already a step forward in the right direction.
In this opposition stronghold, presidential majority supporters have chosen to hold small rallies and campaign village to village instead of holding big meetings.
We have adopted a strategy of proximity campaigning. We go to the people. We talk with them. We do not want to make a fuss. We do not want to make noise. We are peaceful men and women.
Further north in Chaourou, the hometown of former head of state Thomas Boniyayi, founder of the opposition party Les Démocrates, traditional authorities are calling for peaceful elections.
These inclusive elections show that there are no problems. Let no one be afraid to go back to Chaourou. It's a competition, and may the best one win.
After peaceful elections across the country, part of the population is also hoping for the release of all those who were arrested during the violence in 2019, including 2 opposition leaders, Rekia Madugu and Joel Avo.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do stay with us, though. A short break and more coming up from France 24 afterwards. Take care.